So welcome everybody. This is one of my favorite topics, and it's two of my favorite. Well, Maddie, I don't want to disrespect you. Three of my favorite people.
Appreciate that.
It's awesome to have everybody with us. Happy holidays a little bit early. And so we're going to be talking about how cyber insurance and specifically the questionnaires in cyber insurance are changing really the way MSPs need to think about approaching this piece of their relationship with clients and prospects. I'll introduce our guest momentarily. Maddie, I think it'd be a good point now. Let's just even throw out that poll now. I'm going to ask that you guys take a look at this because I think this is apropos. If you're an MSP, this is something that I would love for you guys to let us know. And, just a quick, easy yes or no. Jace, how about you? Are clients asking you to help fill out their questionnaires?
Yes, often.
Sure.
These days, yeah, we'll talk about it. Like we are developing methods to handle it because they are all over the board and there are an increasing number of them.
Yeah. So in interest of that, Jason, why don't you kick things off? We are going to set the stage here and momentarily, but tell us a little about yourself. And it was awesome seeing you at IT Nation. I think you're about 5 or so pounds lighter, losing about a 9-10 inch beard there, if not longer.
Yeah, it was getting pretty homeless. As soon as I realized we were going to make it, I just stopped maintaining it completely just to see how big it would get. It got pretty big by the end there. It was definitely starting to drive me crazy. My name is Jason Slagle. I am president of CNWR. We're an MSP in the Toledo, Ohio area. I somehow have roped myself into being around all these circles and chatting with lots of people. As Andrew alluded to, we just raised 17 of us, I believe, just raised over $200,000 for charity by shaving our giant beards off. Me, Matt Lee, Sean Lardo, Alex Farling, a whole bunch of us shaved beards off. It was a great time.
Yeah, it was awesome. Really cool of you guys to do. What was the, just real quick, Jason, where did the money go?
The money went to 5 main charities, including like Women Who Code, Hackers for Vets, Bits and Bytes, Bike Walk, Wichita, which was Matt Lee's favorite charity, and the Cyber Diversity Council. After we hit our 100K, we have been distributing $5,000 chunks after the GoFundMe fees to other charities. So I believe 16 other charities on top of the initial 5 got additional donations. So it's pretty cool to make a pretty big difference for a lot of charities.
Very cool. Thanks for doing that. Eric, thanks for joining us. As always, it's great to have you. You didn't have a beard to shave.
I didn't. But no, it was a phenomenal cause and great to see it at IT Nation.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little about yourself and your role today here, Eric.
Yeah. So I like to say I'm a recovering MSP owner. Back from the late 90s through 2011, started an MSP, grew the MSP. By the time we sold, it was about 250 employees. So I've seen a lot. I'm a lawyer by training and now a lawyer by practice. I've seen what the legal needs of a 3-person MSP and the legal needs of a 250-person MSP. And then we sold the company to a really, really large MSP, a global MSP called Logicalis. And then I spent about 8.5 years as the general counsel at Logicalis. That means I led the legal department. I was their chief risk officer, head of information security and compliance. Logicalis is a $3.5 billion organization, 3,000 employees around the world. And that was a great experience until the entrepreneurial bug bit again. And I decided to go out on my own and realizing that not a lot of organizations needed someone like me on a full-time basis, but a lot of organizations could use a fractional share of my time. So that's what I do today is my firm represents MSPs, MSSPs, and the ecosystem surrounding them. Whether it's their tool set providers, SaaS companies, software companies, et cetera. That accounts for about 80% of my practice.
Very cool. Thanks, Eric. Okay, so let me, Maddie, can you put up the poll results and I'll set the stage and then we'll get into some questions here with our audience. With our host. And then I'm hoping the audience, you guys, I'll keep an eye on chat. I hope you guys ask questions. Maddie, is the Q&A section available, or is it mainly through chat?
The Q&A section is open as well. So
Okay,
if you
perfect.
wanna-
So
yeah.
ideally, keep the chat going. I love chat. I think it's really effective. But if you have a question, ideally put it into the Q&A, and I'll keep an eye there. But yeah, I mean, look, did the poll results surprise you, Jason?
I want to know who the 5 are.
Exactly.
I guess. Did they hit the wrong button? Are they trolling us?
No, fair enough. Eric, surprised you at all?
Yeah, same, right? Every single one of my clients, and I represent a lot of MSPs, that they're all seeing it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's an issue.
Yeah. So let's kind of, get into this. We have moved, right, in a very, and I always set the stage this way. This is a long time coming, what's happening right now. And what I mean by a long time coming is it was a knee jerk post. It was this, basically, we went SolarWinds, several exchange vulnerabilities, and the Kaseya event of July 2021, this plethora of supply chain attacks, but long time brewing of, especially the reinsurers seeing losses for the first time. And as you guys know, insurance companies have this thing, they don't like to lose money. And what might have seemed like a knee-jerk reaction, again, was going on, where we moved quickly from 5 questions and do you have a heartbeat, and we'll write you $5 million of cyber, to limitations, caps, to premiums going up 60, 70, 80%, and the questionnaires becoming increasingly verbose, and now even to the degree of, first time, it was one thing to see control questions moving into these 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pages. Now we're getting into policy questions as well. So Eric, from your perspective, in the legal side, talk to us a little about things, if you would, like the Travelers incident, if you would start off there, maybe just give a little background. I think a lot of people know about it, but if you give some background on it, and why is this why do MSPs need to be aware of this?
Yeah, and it's a good question, and you did a phenomenal job setting the table, right? Because you go back 15 years, you needed the proverbial heartbeat, and you got a policy, and you got a good policy with a high limit and a low cost and all that. And today it's just getting really, really difficult. And you've got policy exclusions, you have sublimits, and then you've got these questionnaires that are just getting out of control. And the Travelers case is interesting because it directly involves a questionnaire. It directly involves an MSP, and it directly involves an awful lot of money, right? Because if you look at what happened in the Travelers case, just by way of background, so Travelers paid out on a cyber claim, and then during the forensics of this cyber claim, they realized that the client was not using MFA, at least as appropriate, and had they been using MFA, then perhaps this cyber event would have been a little bit better, maybe wouldn't have happened at all, et cetera. So they go back to the application and they say, and they look and they say, well, the client said they were using MFA. And without getting into the nitty gritty of the case, this kind of revolves around a lot of the things that we're going to talk about over the next hour. And that is that maybe they were using MFA, right? Maybe the question wasn't specific enough. Maybe they or their MSP who helped them with this application didn't understand the question. Or maybe they did understand the question and answered it wrong, right? There's a lot of different things that could have happened. But what's happening now is that Travelers is trying to claw back the 7-figure sum that they paid out on this claim, because they're saying that there was, I don't know if they're going to say it was fraud or not, but the application did not match the practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. And by the way, Eric, you know, I have a video of you talking about this previously on the cyber call, which is, you know, a lot of these, there's ambiguity in some of these questions.
Yeah,
And
there's huge ambiguity, and that's where a lot of the risk lies, right? Because if they ask you a question and the two boxes to check are yes and no, and if the real answer is neither yes nor no, what do you do as the MSP, right? As MSPs, we're here to help our customers, right? That's why we help them with our cyber applications, even if most MSPs aren't doing it properly. And again, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but we want to help our customer. We look at a question, and instead of picking the closest answer, right? If it's closer to yes than it is no, there are things you can do as an MSP to mitigate your risk, right? And the biggest thing you can do is involve your customer's insurance broker and say, look, get everyone on the phone, or as I like to say, get all the liars in the room together and say, look, here's the question. Here are the possible answers. Here's the truthful answer. What do we do? And that way you shift the liability from the MSP to the broker. And then instead of perhaps there being a claim against the MSP in the future, now maybe there's a claim against the broker in the future.
Neat. Jason, I'll just start off with, I know you've seen an increase. Obviously, you commented on it earlier. Walk us through what those conversations look like, and do you get them from prospects as well? Like when you're talking to prospects about, you know, CNWR and what you do.
Usually,
kind of just give us a lay of the land for you.
So usually we won't get them from prospects until we're pretty deep into it, right? So shockingly or unshockingly, many prospects are changing providers after they've had an incident of some sort, right? So they very quickly realized they were underinsured or not carrying anything. And now on top of changing providers, they're trying to get coverage at the same time. We've seen instances where they send the questionnaire to us and the incumbent provider, and they compare and contrast the questions we give them. That drives me absolutely crazy. But yeah, I mean, we're seeing a ton of them, and we're also seeing I see a lot of business owners that just don't understand the answers. They want to argue with you about them.
How are you handling it though, Jason? Are you doing them? Are you not doing them? If someone says, hey, Jason, like we got this 7-page, you know, you're our MSP, Jason, you've been our MSP for years. We got this 8-page renewal. Last year was only a few pages. You do the IT. What does that look like?
I will not fill out your questionnaire. What I will do is I will take your questionnaire and I will question by question tell you what the answer is and the supporting reasons as to why I'm picking that answer, including some more information you can include. Because I think that's the thing. And I think it's a lesson that'll probably come up later. You can add data, right? You can click yes and then just submit an additional document saying like, hey, here's why we chose yes, or here's why we chose no, or, you know, we're going to choose yes, but here are the caveats to that yes. You know, you called out MFA, right? So, you know, I'll ask the immediate obvious question, right? And then like, is MFA on in every environment? The answer to almost everybody is no. No one's doing MFA everywhere. I've seen very few people that every single login to every single device, every single website, everything is MFA, because some subset of things still just don't even support it. But, you know, talking particularly where the questionnaires, they tend to call out administrative access, and they tend to call out email access or Office 365 because they're paying a lot of business email compromise. Is security defaults MFA, right? Like, you know, there's a lot of MSPs that are just turning security defaults on and they're saying, yeah, we have MFA. But like, you know, I had that argument with somebody else in the channel, Mendy Green, and he successfully convinced me security defaults to me is not MFA, because Microsoft gets to decide when and if they present you an MFA prompt, right? It's not MFA at every login. So, you know, because of that, there's still a ton of ambiguity in this space.
Interesting. So let's talk, Eric, about risk and exposure for MSPs, right? Because a lot of MSPs do get involved in it. Yeah, sure, we'll do it for you. Talk to us about that and kind of just walk us through, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly of that.
Yeah, no, and it's a great topic to talk about because everyone does it, right? Everybody helps their clients with these applications. The problem is that most MSPs don't do it properly. And there are two big things to consider. One of them is your MSA, right? As an MSP, we have an MSA, and the MSA is the umbrella document that covers all the work that we do. The argument goes like this. So let's say that we're helping a customer with their cyber insurance application. Why are we doing it? Are we under contract to do it? Is it part of our managed service? Do we have a separate statement of work that says we're going to help you with your application? Here's the parameters around which we're going to help you. Most of the time, the answer is no, right? So most of the time, even for a managed services customer, you're going to help them with their application, but you might not be protected by your MSA, right? Because you're doing it outside the purview of your MSA. So that's one big risk area, is helping your customer with the application when you're not obligated to do it. And then what happens? Because you go down the road and something horrible happens and you've got to make an insurance claim on your E&O policy, right? Or you've got to make an insurance claim on your cyber policy. The first thing, and I've been through this 100 times, the first thing that you as the MSP are going to get asked for is show me the contract, right? Because if you are not under contract to provide that service, there's a really good chance you're not going to be covered, right?
Eric,
the second piece, go ahead.
Can I ask about that before we go to the second piece? Because this is really interesting. So much has changed, specifically over the last few years. And I'd love just in chat to people put in, and I hope, just candidly, and who knows, Maddie, if we could even do a poll. But Eric, when you speak, you're sitting at breakfast with somebody, or just even in a potential client, what's the average life that the last time someone looked at their MSA? What, give us the answers you got.
If I had to guess, it's probably 3+ years. Right. When I talk to people, it's usually 3+ years. Now, I think you have to caveat that with who looked at your MSA, right? Did you look at your MSA more than 3 years ago or less than 3 years ago? Or did you have an attorney look at it? And if you had an attorney look at it, was it your brother-in-law who's a divorce attorney? Or was it someone who's really qualified to look at MSAs and say, all right, let's talk about risk and draft it appropriately? Most MSPs, number one, don't look at their MSAs often enough. Number two, don't hire qualified people to look at and revise and help them rewrite their MSAs. Most large law firms, you look at the largest law firms in the world, they don't have people who are qualified or well qualified to help you with your MSA. You really have to go to a specialist.
So Lowell, and I know I might get a point too, but Lowell says, should we include or state it's not included, helping them fill it out?
If that's the case, then fine, but you better not help them fill it out then, right? And you have to make sure that no one in your organization is going to help them fill it out, because sometimes, and we might talk about this a little bit later, but sometimes you might be helping your clients fill out their applications and you'll have no idea. Let me give you an example. Let's say someone calls into your help desk, right? And starts asking questions, do we have MFA? What's our MFA on? Et cetera, et cetera. The help desk person usually isn't going to be savvy enough to say, Mr. Customer, am I helping you fill out your cyber insurance application, right? But they are, and they're responsible for it. So whether they're under contract to do it or not, I'm a big believer that MSA, let me back up. MSPs manage their customers' IT and they manage their customers' security. There's no reason in my mind to not help your customers with their applications, provided that you're doing it properly. It's that second part where most MSPs fall down, is doing it properly. So, because if you're not going to help them with their application, where are they going to go? They're going to go to your competitor, right? Because someone's going to help them with that application if it's not going to be you.
Right. Absolutely. So Eric, let me let you finish your thought on point number 2, and I hope. Yeah,
no. The second point, other than making sure your MSA applies, is make sure that you're insured properly as an MSP, right? Make sure that you have proper errors and omissions, or some people call professional liability insurance. And don't just make sure you have that insurance, but make sure that that insurance covers your actions helping your customers fill out their applications. right? And it all goes down to the conversations that you all have with your insurance broker. When your insurance broker says, what do you do for a living? Right? So I can get the proper E&O policy. Most of the time, I imagine you haven't shared with your insurance broker that you help your customers with their insurance application, right? I'd venture to say very few of you have shared that with your insurance broker. So what does that mean? That means that if you have a problem, if there's a mistake, if there's an error, whether it was intentional or reckless or negligent, whatever it is, and you were helping your customer with their application, and if there's some liability that arises from it, there's a chance that you might not be covered under your professional liability policy, because the way that your policy is written, it doesn't encompass helping your customers with their cyber applications. So get on the phone, not only with a lawyer who knows what they're doing on your MSA, but get on the phone with your insurance broker as well. And I do that usually with my clients, where I will get on the phone with them and their broker just to make sure everyone's covered. Because if your broker says you're covered and you ultimately aren't, well, now you've got a claim against your broker and their E&O policy.
Got it. Got it. Jace, so talk to us about process, because, I know it's something important to you. You don't just do things willy-nilly. People know you in the community. They know you're very diligent, not only about, how you run your MSP, about some of the white hat hacking that you do to help the community at large, finding vulnerabilities in the supply chain of the tools we use. But with this one, as Eric was kind of alluding to, you've kind of taken a stance, we won't fill it out with you, we'll do this. How do you kind of ensure those things like, hey, someone's on the help desk, because clients are clever. They're gonna try to get, they've got to move on. They want their insurance coverage, etc. Does that make sense? And talk to us a little about that, if you would.
Normally the clients, I can't say definitively I've encountered a client that hasn't just sent the questionnaire over, and that if the questionnaire comes into the help desk, they've been instructed, it comes up to me, right? Or it comes up to Matt, my counterpart, right? And we have a process that we use to define it, which is essentially what I described, right? It's like we go through, we haven't yet. I'm getting to the point of just creating a boilerplate document. I'm going to send them back, where I'm going to compile all the questions and, answers to, the common answers, if you have our full stack and everything's turned on and there's no exceptions, that covers that. And then we'll just edit it. I would recommend, I think, unless Eric tells us otherwise, I would recommend everyone produce a document like that. Like, hey, if you have our normal stack, these are the things, and then just and then you just have to make sure you edit that doc to make sure if they're not doing everything that you normally do. So I can't definitively say I've encountered it. I don't believe I've encountered somebody calling our help desk and asking help desk guys if they have MFA. MFA, usually the clients, at least on email, they know if they have it or not. The rest of it,
I was making up that example, Jason. It could be anything that
it's a lot. It's backups normally, right? It's like backups are the ones they're not going to have any idea on. But yeah, we haven't really seen a huge problem with it, but we do have a defined process, right? If one of those questionnaires comes into the help desk, it just gets immediately escalated, and then either Matt or myself takes it.
Okay. So you've kind of quote unquote warned the team, like the team knows, hey, you start hearing stuff like this. Like, hey, is this control in place?
It's the same thing as like a security incident, right? If something comes in and we suspect it's an incident, the help desk immediately escalates it. It's like, you don't get to work on that. Like there's a whole stack of things where it's like level 1, even level 2 people, you just don't get to work on it. If it comes in, you immediately escalate it to somebody more senior, right? Because we have processes around how we handle those things.
Right. All right. Very cool. So there's a question from Lowell. What's the difference between us filling out the form for the customer and producing a detailed document that Jason talks about versus and the client doing it? Like, you advising, like, first, maybe Eric, from your perspective, is there a difference?
Yeah, I think there is a difference. And the form is the product of the work. I think you got to take a step back and say, all right, what are the terms and conditions, Mr. Client, under which I will help you, right? Number one term and condition should be, I'm not responsible for your form, right? You're responsible for your form. I'm going to help you with the answers to your form. I'm not signing your form, right? I'm gonna make suggestions to you, and that's what it goes toward, right? It's who's responsible. if I'm filling out the form, if I'm the MSP and I'm filling out the form all of a sudden, then it makes me look like I'm responsible for those answers. So it's just varying degrees of risk.
So, and then what if Stephen Hicks asked, what if you answer a question incorrectly and the client just forwards on your answer? Will they come after you? And you know, what's the risk there, Eric?
That's where all the risk lies, right? All the stuff we talked about with making sure your MSA applies, making sure your E&O applies. If everything goes hunky dory, none of this matters, right? This only matters if things go wrong. Ideally, you're going to sign these agreements, put them in a drawer and forget about them. Because as soon as you have to pull them out of the drawer and look to see what they say, then that means something's gone horribly wrong. So if you do something wrong, if you give the client a wrong answer, and if they pass that answer along, then you're going to be in trouble, and you better make sure you're covered by your liability limits, your warranty disclaimers, and make sure that you're properly insured.
And it's interesting, Eric, and like all of this, you know, we could go on probably a whole topic about breach attorneys. Yeah. And having a relationship with a breach attorney. And unfortunately, what you're saying, you know, when you speak with a breach attorney, if an MSP is servicing the customer and that customer has a compromise, has an incident, the breach attorney will always tell you, I will pull the MSP in. So it's kind of like we have to do this due diligence that we really didn't have to worry about a few years ago, right? I mean, you know, Jason, has it changed, you know, how you approach business?
Yeah. I feel like I am insurance adjacent now, because the entirety of my existence is risk mitigation and making sure that like I can service clients and not get sued into oblivion when something inevitably goes wrong, because something will eventually and always go wrong.
Yeah, isn't it fascinating? You know, I laugh. I've been in the space since '98, and you know, for years and years and years, it's like, you know, you even think about the tool sets. I'm getting a little nostalgic here, but it was about, you know, your customer sat, you know, how your help desk is doing, right? You know what I mean, Eric? And you know, these tools when you were an MSP, it was like, you know, how well was this, you know, were we responding, how timely, and this and that. And now it's about, you know, again, mitigating risk. It's very different, isn't it?
It's very different, and that's why insurance is different. That's why contracts are different. That's why everything about it is just different.
Yeah.
And you know, I can't tell you how many of my clients are, you know, using documents that were written 10 years ago, or using documents that they grabbed off of Google or got from their insurance provider, whomever.
Right. So let's talk about onboarding. You know, Jason, you know, the last few years have been good for MSPs, you know, especially if you had a good sales process. You've been a security first MSP. We've been onboarding customers. We've got backlogs of onboarding customers. This could be a little bit of a saucy conversation, Jason, but, you know, talk to us first about, you know, your view of requiring a client to have or not have cyber insurance. Will you take them on? Won't you? Just kind of give us your lay of the land there. I'd love to know that, and then like get Eric's perspective.
You cautioned me on this when I responded to you in the email when we did this, so now I'm a little hesitant. But we have just, so full disclosure,
I've got my speech prepared, Jason. Don't worry.
Yeah, I have an MSA that came from one of the big MSP lawyers, and then I sent it to my local, very expensive law firm that their contract guy, basically to make sure that everything that's in that is applicable in Ohio. I recently modified my MSA to require clients to carry a minimum, and I think minimum may be the thing that saves me here, of cyber liability policy, just an attempt to protect myself, to make sure that they have it. We do coach clients, especially, you know, I'm in Toledo, Ohio. We have a lot of manufacturing, right? And I have clients that it's a $500 a minute fine when things are down, right? So, you know, in that case, if there's an incident, $1 million isn't going to be enough, right? So we try to work with the client and say, like, you know, you need to consider what the outside costs are here, right? You really need to talk to your broker. We have a I don't want to plug other vendors in this space on somebody else's webinar, but we work with a vendor in the space that we usually put our clients in touch with to do their cyber stuff if they don't have somebody. And usually they will coach you through that process. But we have modified our MSAs to require our clients to carry at least $1 million of insurance.
So
Eric, tell me how I'm doing it wrong,
yeah.
Eric.
Well, Eric, you may not, because you may say the minimum, but Eric, let's walk through these scenarios.
Yeah.
You know, client MSPs that say, you know, as Jason did, a minimum, or clients that, or MSPs that say you need to carry this amount. Well, walk us again through the good, the bad, and the ugly. When you start putting, you need X.
Yeah. So Jason, I think you're halfway there, right? I mean, I love the fact that you require your customers to have insurance, right? I think it's a great thing. If I were still an MSP owner, and I know this is really easy for me to say in hindsight, but I would not service customers who did not carry cyber insurance, right?
And why, Eric? Just real quick, talk to us about that before you move on.
Because that tells me that they are not taking their cybersecurity posture seriously, right?
Mhm.
If they don't understand the risk associated with all of these threat actors who are out there, and if they're not going to insure against that risk, then I'm not sure. Same reason I wouldn't get in a car with you if you told me you didn't carry auto insurance. Why not? Right? Are you? I think it's crazy. But let's talk about limits for a minute. And Jason, I'm going to put you on the stand.
Yeah, it's fine.
And I'm going to ask you, when your client has a loss of $3 million, you know, I'm going to say, all right, Jason, you told them that they need to carry a minimum of $1 million, right?
Yep.
Why didn't you tell them they need to carry a minimum of $2 million or a minimum of $3 million? Right. So that I think is where the risk lies. And I'm not going to let you answer that, but
okay.
But
I would have.
but I think that's where the risk lies, right? Because as MSPs, I don't want you to be in the business of suggesting policy limits, because you never know what the loss is going to be.
Yeah.
Not only do you not know what the loss is going to be, but you really don't know the risk profile of your customer, right? Maybe it would have been best for your customer to carry $10 million in cyber, and you're just telling them they need at least $1 million, right?
Good luck getting 10 million these days.
Yeah, at least from one carrier. So I think that's the risk, right? I think it's great that you require it. My posture with my clients is tell your customers that it's required, but also tell them they're responsible for figuring out their limits, right?
Okay, that's actually really good feedback, and I will take that to my guy and make the, I don't know, like 12th modification of my MSA in the past 2 years.
But charge him, Jason.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool. Let's see. 1 second here. Sorry, I lost my. There was some. Can I go to a few questions here for you guys? Because
sure.
I know some of these they've been patient. So Valentino all the way asked back. I meet all the criteria to claim and cyber insurance. I'm sorry, I'm doing my best here to understand what the question is. If I meet all the criteria to claim, you know, for cyber insurance, and still the insurance denies it, what should I do? Well, Eric, what you know?
I mean, not to be flip, but if you meet all the criteria, they should write you a policy. The reason they're not writing you a policy is because you don't meet all their criteria for one reason or another, right?
Got it.
So figure out what that criteria is that you are not meeting, and fix it. Right.
Yeah.
You know, there's no magic wand you can wave and you know, like you used to 15 years ago, and say, here's a cyber policy, here's a cyber policy. You've got to meet their criteria. And like Jason mentioned, you know, good luck getting a $10 million policy. He's absolutely right. You know, I represent some very, very large MSPs and very, very large software companies, and small ones as well. And no one that I've seen, no single insurer is at least in the past year or so been writing more than a $5 million policy.
I had it.
I'm sorry, Jason.
I had 10 million until I have it right now, but I suspect this renewal period, I'm going to have to carry a third party policy for the one customer that requires me to carry 10 million.
Yeah, exactly. Or negotiate away that requirement for $10 million. But you can syndicate, right? You can bring in more than one insurance carrier, so that, you know, one carrier will cover the first 5 million, then the next 2 million, then the other one, the next 3 million. The problem with that, though, is what I've seen is that there's no reduction in premium, right? There's no benefit that you get from the second insurance company, even though they're not responsible until you hit $5 million in losses. They're just charging it as if it's for $1. So it's, Jason, I don't need to tell you, it is really, really expensive.
Yeah.
So then Brian asked, does advising, but not filling out the client on the cyber risk questionnaire make the MSP a third party attestation provider, Eric?
I don't think so.
Okay. And then Mark says, asks, is there something? Oh, Mark, I sent that to you in chat. Marcia, be better if I could read. Marcia, is there an online resource where we can look at cyber insurance vendor reputation and responsibilities?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say talk to your broker, right? And not just talk to your broker, but talk to a broker who is very experienced in cyber, because they are the ones that can advise you on who's reputable, who's not reputable. They will help walk you through what you need in terms of policies, what your exclusions would look like, what your sublimits would look like, et cetera.
I have a little to add there. I think that assuming that that the same broker that can service you as an MSP is the same broker that should deal with your clients is probably not a good assumption, because our requirements as providers are markedly different than most of our clients are.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, very cool. I want to ask both of you, and I think it's like, Eric, you kind of alluded to about, alienating a client, right? We all want to help our clients. And this is, one of the more sticky situations now where we've got to say, we've got to either and I think you talked about this with Dave Bennett on the cyber call once. Maybe can you walk us through a continuum? And what I mean by this is, I think you can put it in for $0. There's some ways you can do things creatively and not alienate your client. But could you maybe give the audience a continuum of what is possible? And let's talk about this. And I'd love Jason's perspective, and then the audience as well.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, right? And none of us as MSPs like putting more contracts in front of your customers to sign, right? It's a pain in the ass. They roll their eyes. Why do we have to do this? I don't want to send my legal and all that stuff. But you have to have something, right? And whether that something is a statement of work that's carefully crafted, that says what you're going to do, what you're not going to do, what your customer is responsible for as it relates to their application, even if you don't charge your customer for that service, right? And 3 years ago, I don't think anyone charged their customers to help them with their cyber applications. Today, about half the MSPs I talk to say, yes, it's a profit center for us, or it's a loss leader, right? They'll charge them, $500, even though it'll cost them $1,000. So you've got to get that some documentation in front of your customer, whether it's a $0 statement of work, whether it's a paid statement of work at a T&M rate or a fixed fee, or just add it to your managed services statement of work, right? Say, look, as part of our managed services, we're going to help you with your cyber insurance application. That's it. That's all you have to do to get it to tie back to your MSA to make sure that you are adequately protected.
Nope. We lost your audio, Andrew.
You're muted, Andrew.
I'm not sure how that happened. Sorry, guys and gals. Jason, any thoughts on that? Would you, if you had a $0 SOW, would that make you feel more comfortable, or would you just
I actually just wrote that down as the thing to do. And what we'll probably end up doing is because we don't presently do that. And so I join these things as an expert and often end up learning things myself. I will almost certainly just add it to my managed services statement of work and the MSA I use there, or the statement of work I use there, because I would have questions about how binding a $0 statement of work would be, just because enrichment, I mean, you're the lawyer, right? Like, if I'm not charging for it and I give them a $0 SOW, like, there's no enrichment for me. So like, I don't necessarily, I don't know, you're the lawyer, tell me how that goes one way or the other.
Yeah, you mean consideration?
Yeah.
So yeah, even though there's not financial consideration, right? You're still helping them, they're helping you, you're doing it as a service, it's a goodwill thing. I think that the argument is there that there's plenty of consideration. You don't have to
Okay.
the adequacy of consideration, it's just either there or not. So the fact that you're helping them and they're going to maintain the relationship with you, in my mind, is enough.
Okay. I mean, as long as you think it's defensible as a lawyer, then I'm
But
all on
this is
board.
not legal advice. We don't
Of
have
course.
attorney-client relationship.
100%. Yet, maybe soon.
Yes, exactly. It sounds like you need it. I probably know who wrote your MSA, and I should probably take a look at it.
So Jeremy asks, Jason, with all you've done, do you sleep at night knowing, you're covered, question mark, or is there still a level of risk that's always, never full?
Man, I answered in the chat only semi-jokingly. I come to these things and I talk to people like Eric and Chris Layer, and like they just make me not want to be an MSP anymore.
Or just an MSSP.
Yeah.
Do you ever think that, by the way?
Yeah, that's I don't know. Maybe, I mean, that just has a different, even more terrible potential set of problems, honestly. I feel pretty good. I spend a lot of time evaluating the risk to us, the risk to our clients, and do my best to minimize the risk to us. I mean, one of the reasons I'm very interested in making sure that my clients maintain their own policy is, if they don't have a policy, they're just going to come at me, right? And then it's going to be my policy. I'm going to have to defend against them trying to hit my policy for it, right? So at least if I have them have a policy and either they get hit or like knocking on every piece of wood I can find around here, we were to experience like an MSP level breach, at least I'm not undercovered then, or as woefully undercovered as I would be if none of them held a policy.
Got it. Speaking of policy, Jason, and I'd love everybody's comment, and whoever would like to comment in chat. Here's something I've heard from many MSPs. They're looking at their cyber insurance questionnaire, Jace, and it's like, do you have an incident response plan? And they're like, oh, Jason does. I'm good. Right. My MSP has one. Have you run into that? If you're an MSP,
Yeah.
have you heard that? How do you help them with, again, things that a lot of companies in the SMB space aren't, incident response plan, tabletops, kind of walk us through that, if you would.
Yeah, so we started, I mean, this has been probably a year and a half process where we started with our largest clients and we're working our way down to make sure that they have all those policies in place. If the insurance renewal comes up, obviously that bumps it up the list. I think everyone needs to have an incident response plan, and I'm going to call you isn't a plan. Right. Like, because you're going to call me and I'm going to tell you to call insurance or a lawyer, because until that happens, I'm not going to talk to you. Because I don't want to be on the hook for, screwing up forensics or any number of other bad things that can happen. And there's the Chris Layer, scaring the crap out of me. And so calling me isn't a plan, right? Like you have to have a plan, you have to have a communication plan. You have to have some of these things in place. So, we've gone down the road of starting to do that, starting to do with some of our more mature clients now. In this one, we are not going to biggest to smallest. We're trying to go most mature to least mature, where we're starting to run tabletops. It's really hard to run a tabletop with like a 3-person accounting firm. Right. They just don't want to do it. You take their whole office out of service and you're just not mature enough to do it. Right. So it's like, you have a conversation with them about risk. You try to get some level of incident response plan in for them, and, you call it good enough, and you move on to the next one.
Interesting. Erica, are you hearing this as well? Hey, my MSP's got it. From, in terms of the incident response plan, and are you seeing this question more in cyber insurance policies? Are we going to see more policy-based questions, do you feel?
Oh, no doubt. And we're already seeing more policy-based questions. And yes, absolutely. I hear it all the time from MSP's customers about whether it's incident response or disaster recovery or what have you. But it also leads to an interesting point about where you draw that line as an MSP between your day-to-day managed services and whether or not you will help a customer respond to an incident as part of your managed services. And I typically advise my clients that no, you at the beginning of a security incident, that is outside the scope of your MSP agreement with them. And you don't want to respond, you don't want to mitigate, you don't want to do the forensics. It should all be separate. And it's just a different beast. So coach them, right? And make sure that they know what to do, make sure that they have a plan, make sure, like Jason said, it works reasonably well, given the posture of their organization. You know, a 3-person accounting firm is going to have a much different incident response plan than a 300-person accounting firm, and the mid-size one too. So, but also make sure they exercise it, right? I'm a huge believer, and I see it every day. And I'm not a breach attorney, but you know, my clients have been through this. You are going to play like you practice, right? And if you don't practice, you're not going to play very well. If you practice poorly, you're not going to play very well. You know, you've got to make sure that just having a plan isn't enough, that you're actually exercising that plan on a regular basis.
Yeah, very true. So I'm probably going to butcher the name, so I apologize. Froylan. I'm new to this. How do we know if there's a breach? First off, please never say breach, because there's incidents. There's the B word. So there's, you know, you're going to have an incident. You always start with, you know, an incident, an event. Doesn't mean there's necessarily exfiltration and data involved. These days, although, you know, again, you didn't hear this here, right? But something called double extortion, you got to believe they're going for that these days. But it does bring up the point I want to ask both of you, Jay, starting with you, because we're talking now about incident response. It's a big piece that's going to be more and more asked in insurance questionnaires. But do you put a demarcation in for your customers that, hey, if we feel there's something nefarious in nature, and you know, you're paying us $250 a seat today, whatever it is, basically that ends the managed service relationship. We're now in T&M, or we now are going to bring in a third party to validate or invalidate this potential nefarious behavior. How do you deal with that? Do you deal with it? Is it process driven?
We will go up to indicators of compromise, right? So we'll declare an incident internally. We will start investigating. And as soon as there are incidents or indicators of compromise, we tell you, okay, yes, there is an incident. We'll isolate, like we'll try to stop the damage if we can do it in a way that's not forensically challenging, right? So if it's a ransomware incident, I'll isolate the host, right, or the hosts, and we'll cut it off from the internet. We'll do whatever we need to do. We won't turn anything off, and we will tell you to call insurance, or we will tell you to call a breach counsel, and we will stand down until such a point that we are engaged by them to do the work, or we are cleared by them to do the work, right? I don't want that liability.
This is a really important point, Eric. Where should that fall in your either statement of work, MSA? Can you talk to us about that? Because this is because again, we live in a different world. We didn't have to worry about this, right? Yeah. And now we do. Where should this live and communicate this to our clients?
Well, and when is also the question, right?
Right.
You don't start having this conversation with your clients when you suspect a security incident. 90% of MSPs out there, that's what they do, right? They suspect there's a security incident. They say, hey, Mr. Customer, I'm out, call whomever, but I'm done, right? You've got to have this conversation with your customers up front. It's got to be part of your statements of work up front. Your customer has to know that if especially, you know, for my MSPs that are 24/7, for example, you know, what happens at 3 a.m. when I can't get a hold of you, right? And I suspect that there's a security incident, my more sophisticated MSPs essentially give their customers a choice. What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do if I identify a security incident and I can't get a hold of you, right? Do you want me to do the best I can? Do you want me to isolate? Do you want me to unplug? What do you want me to do? But again, it's done in advance, right? The customer knows in advance, they've signed in advance, and they know exactly what's going to happen. I can tell you from my experience, and this might be a little self-serving, although I am not a breach attorney, but call your attorney first, right? Your attorney has been through this before. They know exactly what to do. And I can tell you anecdotally, and Andrew, I shared this story with you before, over the summer, I had a relatively new customer of mine, big software company. The guy called me on a Monday morning and said, "Hey, I got a question for you." And I said to him, "Hey, I'm really busy. Can we talk like after hours?" And he said, "Sure." So not thinking it was important, I talked to him after hours that day. He said, "Yeah, I just want you to proofread this letter I want to send out to 32 of my clients because there was a data breach." And I said, "There's a data breach and you want to send a letter out to your clients?" I said, "Well, have you talked to your insurance, your insurer?" And he said, "No." "Talk to your breach counsel?" "No, I just want to send this letter out." Right. So that's an example of an organization that clearly plays how they practice. Right. Because they didn't rehearse that. They didn't have an incident response plan, and they were just going to send notification to 32 of their clients that there was a data breach and their PHI data was breached. Their CJIS data was breached. It would have been really, really bad. And he was just calling me to proofread the letter. Right.
Wow.
So you have to plan in advance.
Yeah, very cool. Jace, back to you. You kind of alluded to CIS a little bit. And I know you personally, like you're saying, the due diligence you do, you're at, implementing or fully implemented implementation group 2. We're talking, by the way, when I use the acronym CIS, Center for Internet Security, there's 3 implementation groups. Number 1 being essential cyber hygiene. So my question to you, Jason, is 1, are you using that kind of as a framework? And the reason I want to ask this in relation to our webinar today is when you look at cyber insurance questionnaires, even though Phyllis from CIS will deny it, they certainly align very well to implementation group 1. Yeah. So I just want to get your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, that's where we're aiming all clients. Again, it's a journey for some of them, right? We're onboarding several right now that it will take a while to get them there, right? Like it's you don't normally inherit the cleanest networks. I do find that CIS IG1, it maps to a bunch of other things that are basically basic cyber hygiene. And right now, my experience is most of the questionnaires are aligning to that. I am starting to see some questionnaires that are asking about things that would be IG2, like specifically 24/7 SOC and some SIM services. And I don't know if they're risk rating yet, because that's part of the problem with these questionnaires is, you get a client gets a questionnaire and it's got, 100 questions on it, and they think they have to answer yes to every one of them, and that you don't, right? Like it's, you can know is okay. Like not every question is risk rated. So I'm not actually sure which of those IG2 questions are actually risk rated these days.
Yeah. So I got 2 more quick questions for you. Why, and shout out here to CyberFox for doing this. You've been a long time Auto Elevate user. Why do you feel PAM, Privileged Access Management? Why is that all of a sudden the new sexy? Why is it the new EDR? But obviously a really important control. Why all of a sudden are insurance companies just laser focused on this control?
I'm trying to think of the best way to answer this here.
Yeah.
So, in the end, it stops you from having to, in some cases, give users more access than they need, right? So you see a lot of MSPs that don't implement a solution like that. And you have a user that says, and I'm going to pick on QuickBooks here because it is the example, right? So you got a user that has QuickBooks and, they're tax season's coming and there will literally be an update to QuickBooks like every 10 days from now until tax season, because all the tax rules are changing and solidifying. And, in QuickBooks, you can't do payroll if it's not up to date in many cases. Right. So these MSPs, they get overwhelmed with tickets. And so they just give up and they're like, you know what, I'm going to make that user a local admin. But when you use a PAM solution, you don't have to do that anymore, right? So it allows you to more easily practice least privilege. And it is, in the end, it is the marketing term that the insurance agents can use to indicate an actual underlying technology practice or policy practice, which is a practice of least privilege, right? And so the reason they're focusing in on that is what they're actually after is least privilege. But when they say PAM, it's an adjustable marketing term most people understand.
But as a white hat, I mean, if you were to compromise an environment, you want that lateral movement, don't you? Ideally.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's
so
way harder. Anything that's got any sort of solution like that on it is going to be like considerably harder to escalate as well as laterally move with the solution like that in place.
Got it. So in interest of time here, I know we're coming up on the last 5 minutes. Lowell put in a question. I want to ask that. And then I have a few more, but hopefully we can round. But great, by the way, I want to thank the audit. You as an audience, you guys have been fantastic. We started right around 107. We're still at 107. And that means Jason, you and Eric have been awesome. So thank you for that. Lowell asks, M365 login attempt, MFA's blocked from a malicious actor in a different country, no indicators of compromise, Jace, but it's a security incident. So we're going to investigate, do a password change. Is this isn't included in your MSA that give us your perspective on this?
Man, this is so we literally just had something like this and it turned out to be nothing. It turned out to be an application they were using. But this was, I had my service manager, he was arguing with me. He's like, we can't not do that. I don't know. I'm willing to admit when I don't know where that line is. And that line is very clear and hard to define because these things happen all the time. It's pretty common. You do your best to stop them. I'm going to defer to Eric here. Maybe he can teach me something.
It is tough and it is hard to define. And the only analogy I have is, you go back 30 years ago and, there were hearings in the Senate about pornography, right? And someone asked the senator to define pornography. And he said, well, I can't define it. It's too hard, but I know it when I see it, right? And same thing with security incidents, right? I mean, our clients are bombarded with attacks every single day. When do you declare an incident or when do you not? It's almost like it when you see it, but it's nearly impossible to define.
Yeah,
I mean, we'll declare an incident, but whether or not we tell them they need to engage counsel and stuff,
yeah.
right? Okay, so they had an out of country login. Most of the time, I find that it ends up being some app or something that they're running or using, and it's not actually compromised. But even if so, if there's indications that they actually access the accounts and actually did anything with it, then that immediately, again, when you see it, okay, well, that's a thing, right? But if there's no actual indicators of compromise, then other than the login, then perhaps maybe it's not an incident that I'm going to tell you to go away, not go away, but to go to your lawyer. I guess, to defer back to you again, it comes down to whether or not there are actual damages potentially, as to whether or not is there actual risk here. If there's actual risk, then I want you to defer to a lawyer and I want you to defer to counsel or to insurance. If there's not really any risk, then we probably just declare the incident, write up what we found, and move on with our days.
Yeah, and the issue there, Jason, is that depending on your agreements with your customers, right? Sometimes your agreement with your customer says, look, if there's a security incident, you need to tell me about it. Mm-hmm. Right. And where is that threshold about when you have to tell a customer whether there are damages or not? Right. And that I think is the tough part.
Yeah, it is.
What did you guys think? Good webinar. Was this helpful? We could send awesome. Maybe we could send that poll out to Maddie when you send out the recording. What other things would people would like to see? And what they'd like to hear about. We certainly could go into breach counsel next, but I'm going to close us out by first wishing everyone a happy and healthy Thanksgiving. Second, Jason and Eric, I want to thank you so much for your generosity and your time and your expertise. It was awesome having you guys on. And lastly, thank CyberFox for making this possible. So
Thank you.
wishing everybody a great one. And until then, everybody take care.
Yeah,
Thanks, everyone.
thank you.
Yep. See ya.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.